Good afternoon, everybody. Today's Battle Rhythm, supporting those who serve part-time, supporting National Guard members, will be hosted by Jeanette Gillis. Thank you, Jeanette. Jeanette is the director of the network at America's Warrior Partnership. The network provides local veteran serving organization with a connection to national resources when a veteran's request cannot be met locally. To find out more, please contact americaswarriorpartnership.org/the network. That's it for me. Jeanette, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to October and our wonderful Battle Rhythm. We'd like to give a shout out to all of our branches, affiliate communities, veteran service organizations, and other guests that are joining us today. Today we have an exciting group of experts, and they're going to provide insight and information about supporting National Guard service members. National Guard service members in the National Guard face unique challenges as they balance civilian careers, family life with military duty. We have three guests with us today that we'd like to welcome. We've got Josh Baker. Josh is a Chief Master Sergeant and President of the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the U.S. We have Susan Robinson. She's a Program Analyst for Reserve Component Transition Assistance Advisor Program, and Amy Hale, who is the RCTA Advisor for the same program. Please feel free to add questions and thoughts throughout the chat box as we go along. We'll address questions throughout the panel, and at the end of the panel series if time allows. We'll also have a few polls today that Allison has prepared for us, so everyone will have a chance to participate. I'm going to pass the panel over to today's first presenter, Josh. And while Josh is sharing his PowerPoint, Allison is going to share our first poll of the day.
All right, thank you very much. So hi, everyone. As introduced, my name is Josh Baker, and I serve part-time in the California Air National Guard as a Chief Master Sergeant, and I also serve as the President of the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States, because our founders couldn't think of anything longer to call it. And I also happen to serve as the President of the state chapter of the same association for the California Enlisted Association of the National Guard in the United States. I will tell you a little bit about us as Ingus. If you want to react on your screen with the thumbs up, who's ever heard of Ingus, or the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States? You can give me a little thumbs up. But chances are you probably haven't. And even our National Guardsmen who are serving in the armories, who are at your Air Guard bases, they've never even heard of us, but they know the benefits that we've given them. So a little bit about our association. We were founded in 1972 out of necessity because there were so many issues, or there were so many entitlements that National Guardsmen were not afforded. At one point in our military history, National Guard were essentially treated like second-class service members, where there was a time in our National Guard history that you wanted uniforms, you had to go buy them. There was a time in our National Guard history that we were not allowed to go into a commissary at all, period. There was a time that we were not afforded the opportunity to have life insurance through the government, the SSLI. And there was a time that we didn't have a retirement program. And I can't fathom the idea of why somebody would want to go into the National Guard component of the military, besides having that really affinity to serve, to give back, or maybe, especially back in those days, if you wanted a break from your wife and kids at home. But out of that necessity, our association was founded to advocate for our benefits. And I'll talk about a little bit over our legislative victories over the years. And since our founding, every state and territory has essentially its own chapter. So again, I'm the president of the California Enlisted Association, where the state associations will dive deeper into state legislation and work with the state lawmakers on their individual states' National Guard rights, entitlements, and benefits. So Ingus represents about 450 enlisted and commissioned members of the National Guard, and Ingus is the only association that specifically works issues for the enlisted force of the National Guard. So talk a little bit about what Angus has worked on legislatively. Oh, healthcare. Again, there was a time in our National Guard history that members of the National Guard were not afforded healthcare at all at one point. And then at one point, we were able to win for our folks that retired out of the National Guard that they became eligible for TRICARE for life. And within the past 10 years, we were able to pass legislation that members of the National Guard can buy into a TRICARE Reserve Select program. So for a GI Bill, again, at one point, National Guardsmen were never afforded the right to use the original Montgomery GI Bill. And now that the post 9/11 GI Bill is the new cool thing on the block, there was a time when that was founded that National Guardsmen were not allowed to use it. And so we first advocated for Title 32 time, and we'll talk about different statuses a little later. So those are your AGRs that time would count towards their post 9/11 GI Bill benefits. And right now we have bills that are working that would count all of our time as National Guardsmen. Anytime that we serve in uniform would count towards our post 9/11 GI Bill benefits. Where right now that they don't. So anytime that we're out on drill weekends, we're doing our 2 weeks of training, our 1 week a month, 2 weeks a year type of training, none of that counts towards our post 9/11 GI Bill time that we need to use that program. Essentially, Guardsmen have to volunteer to go to war in order to be eligible to use the post 9/11 GI Bill. The retirement improvements. So again, I mentioned earlier that at one point in the National Guard, you didn't earn any retirement benefits. And so we were able to change that where we actually do have retirement benefits now. And again, with the survivor benefit plan, again, at one point, we never had it. And so now we're working on making that even bigger and more beneficial to our Guardsmen. For veteran status, at one point, even if you retired from the National Guard, you were not considered a veteran. And so we did pass legislation now that, so when you retire from the National Guard, you are now considered a veteran. And recently we were able to change policy that when a National Guardsman completes a stint of their service, their 4, 6, 8-year service commitment, that at the end of that service commitment, they're now issued DD 214s. So they're able to get that piece of paper and take that to their VSO, to the VA, and they're able to get benefits because before they were given an NGB form 4, 14, 44, one of those numbers. And that would just confuse a lot of VSOs that didn't understand what the NGB form was. Affordable living. So again, mentioned at one point, National Guardsmen were not afforded the luxury of shopping at a commissary. And about 30 years ago, our association went to Congress and they changed. And they said, fine, you drill 1 week in a month. So therefore, you can go to the commissary 12 times in a year. And Guardsmen were issued little punch cards. And when they went to the commissary to do their shopping, the checker punched their card and they were only able to go 12 times in a year. It wasn't until after the events of September 11th and our association went back to Congress and said, look, we are in the airports, we're in your communities, we are busy. This is an entitlement we would like to have all the time. And so Congress changed the law, and now National Guardsmen can shop at the commissary whenever we like. Education support. So you're probably a little familiar with tuition assistance. So I'm a California Air National Guardsman. I do not have the ability to use tuition assistance. It's not a program that's written in the law for an Air National Guardsman. It's written in there for Army National Guardsmen. And so that's something that we're working on. But that was something that Angus provided for, was that the Army National Guard has access to tuition assistance. Something that Angus was a huge proponent on was elevating the chief of the National Guard Bureau to a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So that gives the National Guard an equal voice in that giant room of all of that general leadership at the Pentagon. And that last bullet on there is about the Challenge Program. If you've never heard of the Challenge Program, I hope that you write that little note down and you go and Google it a little later. But I think that the Challenge Program, it's probably one of my favorite things that the National Guard does, and is the most unique thing that you probably didn't know that the National Guard does. But the state's National Guard will go and have these youth programs that work with troubled youth in your community, and it gets them on a structure, it gets them their high school diploma, and depending on your state and how elaborate your program is, it gets them job skills so they're able to become productive members of society. But the Ingus has worked very hard to make sure that funding is available for these challenge programs. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our benevolent program. So our legislative programs are our bread and butter, but we also have a benevolent program because many times a lot of those VSOs that are out there that are out there to help veterans, sometimes our National Guardsmen are not considered veterans. So we created our own 501c3 organization called the National Guard Relief Foundation. And that's set up to help National Guardsmen for whatever reason. So most recently, especially this year, being a California National Guardsman, we had a lot of fires out in the LA area, and that impacted some guardsmen that lost their homes. And so we have this foundation that's able to go and provide either grants or 0% loans to National Guardsmen to try to help them get back on their feet and to assist them. And you can find out more information about our National Guard Relief Foundation with the website below at ngrelief.org. And that's, again, information on how to apply and information on how to donate as well. All right, so let's talk about duty statuses. So for your National Guardsmen, we have about 29 different duty statuses that National Guard can be on, both involuntary and voluntary statuses under 27 different sections of the law. So it gets very confusing, and this is very topical. You looked at your news recently, the National Guard is in the news and we're activated in different places. But what you may not understand and may not know is we're activated under different titles and laws, and those different titles and laws come with different benefits. So the first activation that happened in my state of California, where the President of the United States activated the California National Guard. So under that activation was under Title 10. Under the Title 10 activation, that provides those National Guardsmen are essentially on active duty status, a Title 10 status. And with that activation, they are treated no different than active duty. So they'll have VA benefits when they come off of that deployment. They're able to use any tuition assistance. They're able to use, really, if you think of any of the active duty things that service members gets, they're entitled to that, which, and we'll get on to the next slide, which is different from those folks that are activated in the DC area. So this list in front of you, again, is all of the different ways that National Guardsmen can be activated. And this is for federal activations. So when the president can come down and activate National Guard forces. And then we have a Title 32 status. So a Title 32 means it's a full-time National Guard duty, federally funded, but state controlled, meaning that the governor still maintains the control of their state's National Guard forces, because essentially the National Guard is the governor's force, but the National Guard does serve two masters. Again, that's why how the National Guard can be activated on Title 10. If you think of it, we're kind of like a franchise in a little bit of a sense. So we can, like I said, be activated on both sides. So what your National Guardsmen, so think about, especially in the picture right there. So those National Guardsmen there, both activated from South Carolina, Mississippi, and I think North Carolina. So they're activated on 32 USC 502F orders. So what that means is they don't get a lot of benefits and entitlements because of those. So we talked a little bit about your post 9/11 GI Bill time. The way that that code is written, they're not going to get any credit for their post 9/11 GI Bill for the time that they're spending in DC. Depending on how many days they're on those orders, they may not receive healthcare coverage. They may not receive VA benefits after their activation. So I was in DC a few weeks ago and talked to some of the troops that were out on the field. And when we get activated, whether it's on Title 10 or Title 32, that comes with medical benefits for not only for the member, but also the family. So you'll have members that are working their regular full-time jobs, and they'll have to transfer from, their Kaiser, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and they'll get put on TRICARE. And sometimes there's a lapse in coverage because we all may know that the government may not be as efficient as it would like to be, and there might be a lapse in coverage. And so there's sometimes where a family may go 30 days without medical coverage. I wanted to give that and share that as an example because that was one of the issues for one of the soldiers that I talked to, where him and his wife had a child during that lapse in time, and it can be a very scary time if you don't know how to navigate it. So we also do have some of the other different statuses, and this last block on the bottom, the other common Title 32 statuses, is that inactive duty training. So our 2 weeks a year. Same with the ADT training. And then we also have those AGR Title 32. Those are that full-time force that essentially keeps the engine running for the rest of, we call them the M-Day, the drill status guardsmen, those part-time forces that you typically think of that takes that is roughly about 80 to 85% of our National Guard force. And then if you weren't confused enough, let me confuse you just a little bit more. And so we also have our emergency or state active duty orders that National Guardsmen can be on. Depending on the state that you're in, is called something different. It's either state active duty or emergency state active duty, like what we have in California and Texas, and I believe New York has it as well. But that's when the state is in a state of panic. In California, we have 4 seasons for the National Guard. We have riots, floods, earthquakes, and fires. So you see the picture there, that is California National Guardsmen responding to fires, and they're activated on an emergency state active duty. And so essentially, when they're in a state active duty, they're essentially state employees. They are not getting any credit towards their post 9/11. They are not getting any credit towards their military retirement. They're essentially not military folks, but they are in uniform. And one of the worst things is they're not covered under the VA. So if they're hurt on this mission and perish the thought that they die on any of their ESAD missions, that they're not considered military at this point. So there's no VA coverage if they get injured. There's no going to the VA and seeking treatment later, no getting a percentage rating afterwards. They're essentially state employees. And the mechanism is, if they are injured on these missions, that because they're state employees, it's a workers' comp claim. And to further confuse you even more, so there's some states actually have a state militia. And so I have listed on the bottom all the different states that have their own individual state militia. And for the most part, these are the folks that augment and assist the full-time National Guard force, or they assist in state emergencies. So like for California, for example, during the COVID crisis, so our California State Guardsmen were activated under ESAD status, and they could be professionals like some doctors or nurses. And we have quite a few lawyers that are California State Guardsmen who just have an affinity to serve, that want to give back and to provide their expertise to the National Guard force. And I did want to bring up some different quality of life concerns that maybe you didn't consider, maybe you didn't know about. So one of the biggest ones that we hear from our National Guardsmen that are out drilling in their community armories and in the Air Guard bases is access to affordable childcare. Because we're not on an active duty base, we don't have a childcare center that's available to us. And so that can be an issue for some of our folks that have young families, that they just don't have access to childcare. And in the same respect, because they're out in the communities, they're not within a 5-mile fence line, so they don't have access to family support programs. And sometimes their family support programs may be multiple counties away, and they're going to have to provide support either over the phone or a video call. And I mentioned earlier the healthcare gaps between duty statuses. When we get activated on those Title 10 or Title 32 orders and healthcare kicks in, well, sometimes it takes 30 days for it to kick in if we're activated for over 29 days. And in that lapse, something may happen. And so that it does create some anxiety for our National Guard folks. So some job protections. So yes, USARA does protect us when we are activated for those Title 10 and Title 32 mobilizations. But when our governor activates us for when our state is in a state of panic, where the governor is calling upon us in a state active duty status, USARA doesn't protect us in that status. So a lot of times our leadership will work with those individual employers, and those USARA awards pay dividends, where, you know, I always encourage my airmen to put in your job, put in your employer for that USARA award, because there'll be a time in the future where you're going to need to activate, and because we've already paid into the paid that goodwill already, hopefully we can make a withdrawal of, I'm sorry, boss, I need to go, even though it's not protected, but because you paid that goodwill forward already. If you think typically on your military base, when a unit deploys, a lot of the families are on the military base, and they can help each other out, and they can talk about, you know, the lack of their loved one being missing, and they can kind of lean on each other, right? Well, sometimes, a lot of times, because we're out in the communities, we're not living on the base, and when those mobilizations happen, they have that geographic isolation from their military communities. So our family programs folks have to think of different ways to bring the families together, because they're not within that 5-mile fence line. And then we also have the issue of mental health and behavioral health access. So again, a lot of our guardsmen are not considered veterans. And so when they do have a mental health crisis, and if they're not considered a veteran, a lot of times they'll walk into one of those VSOs that offer mental health care, but they can't help them because, again, they're not considered a veteran. And education and child stability. So a lot of, for our National Guard, or I'm sorry, for our active duty counterparts, that they do a really good job about identifying some of those programs, and they make sure that when the active duty member transitions or PCSs, that program stays. That is sometimes, many times, broken with National Guard families when they do have they're transitioning units. There's not that continuation. And again, that last piece, again, because many of our National Guardsmen are not considered veterans, they may not have access to some VSOs that require them to be veterans. And so my wife was a family program person working with the Army National Guard, and that was something that always boggled her mind, to have, you know, a specialist in E4 looking for help and assistance that was homeless, and she could not get that soldier into any housing programs or job programs because he wasn't considered a veteran. So sometimes that is a barrier for us National Guardsmen. Hopefully you learned a little something about Angus. And again, every state has its own independent chapter. So I encourage you to go to the Google machine, and you can type in Angus, your state, and find that state association, because I can almost guarantee you that each of your individual states is doing their own programs, working on their own legislation. They might even have their own benevolent society that can go out and help any of your National Guardsmen that are impacted by some issues. And many times, like what for the California Enlisted Association, we're advocating for all members. Our latest legislation that we were able to pass in California. So California was the last state in the nation that fully taxed military pensions out of state taxes. Well, this year, the California Enlisted Association sponsored a bill, and it was signed by our governor that the first $20,000 will be tax exempt from state taxes. So again, depending on the state, they represent and advocate for all veterans. I will take any questions if anybody has any questions.
We have quite a few here, Josh. D is asking, what is the difference between the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard?
Yes, so it would be Air Force or U.S. Army, and really it's a matter of when I deploy, I go to hotels. When the Army deploys, it goes to tents, and sometimes it's really the same difference between the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force. It's just the missions are a little different. And I think if you want to dive into it a little bit deeper, so on the Army National Guard side, depending on how your state is set up, you have those little armories that I'm sure you've seen in your communities that you're like, oh, that's weird. I see that National Guard armory. I wonder what that is. And it's maybe a few buildings that have some really cool military trucks and tanks set up there. Well, on an Air National Guard side, we're essentially an air guard base that's, when we're there because we're flying those big loud things, and all of our support equipment is contained within that 5-mile fence line.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got another one. What can be done for those who have medical issues during the lapse of policy, during the lapse of medical care? And who should we direct National Guard members to? So this one looks...
Yeah, that's a great question. So in theory, those National Guardsmen have a medical unit that they're attached to. That would be my first suggestion to go to of, hey, doc, I had this go on. Who should I talk to? And chances are you also have a TRICARE, either a TRICARE or your civilian care, and start talking between the two of, this is what's going on. This is what happened. It happened in the lapse. I was covered, but I wasn't, right? And always, 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 as a last resort, you have an elected official. Each of those elected officials has a military service liaison in their office. So if it's something where you're just running up against a wall, that military service member is they cannot get answers, that is always a great option, is to contact your elected official, your U.S. congressman, your U.S. senator, and say, look, this is how I was treated. This is what happened. And this is my issue. And there is somebody that is dedicated to finding those answers. And because they're coming from either a congressman's office or a senator's office, they have access to doors that you and I just don't have access to.
All right, thank you. We've got another one. Ryan wants to know, when activated under each law, is an information packet provided? Something which covers everything pertaining to the specific law with resources included.
So, it depends from state to state, unit to unit. And if you're consulting with any of your National Guardsmen who are activated, ask their personnel section of, hey, I'm activated on this. What does that mean? What am I entitled to? What should I be asking for benefits? And that personnel section, whether it's Army or Air Force, will have those answers.
And let's see, I think we've got time for one or two more. Allison is asking, are vet centers allowed to offer mental health services to National Guard members?
Oh, I don't know what the policies are for vet centers if they can. So, the answer would be it depends. Because if the vet centers say, okay, we offer services to all veterans. So remember, some National Guardsmen aren't considered veterans. So is that a checkbox for the vet center?
All right. And the last one, we've got just another minute or two. Tristan is asking, can you expand more on the details of the Title 10, Section 1015D? Reading through the law, it indicates qualified armed forces as defined by Section 101 of Title 10, which defines armed services as follows. So his question is, can you point me in the direction of proper reference material? He's wanting to track some of the benefits of National Guard under those circumstances.
Yeah, Tristan, if you got my email address, it's the president@ingus.org. I think we can take this offline. That's probably going to require me to do a little more digging, so I can't answer this one off the.
All right. And I just had a quick one up here. How do National Guard members access retirement benefits when they reach 60?
Yes. one day I would like to get there. Oh, I didn't mention that. That was one of the other things that Ingus has won. So when we do deploy federally, when we're mobilized, so that's the other big difference between active duty and the National Guard is when active duty deploy or when they retire at age 20, they can start collecting right then and there. For us National Guardsmen, we have to wait until we're 60 before we can collect. So yes, I have 25 years of service, and my joke is I just need one bad drill weekend and I can retire, but I can't collect anything. I can't do anything. So I might as well keep going until I can reach 60. But so one thing that Ingus has done is for every day that we do on Title 10 orders, that makes us more, it moves our line of when we can retire. So for me, I have about a year and a half of federal mobilization as being a National Guardsman that I'm able to retire or collect a year and a half before my 60th birthday. So to answer your question, they should be going through, and I'm sure some of the other folks can help me because I haven't gone through that process, is through your personnel section or through
your retirement services officer.
Thank you. That one. Yes, that was the acronym I was thinking of.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that presentation, Josh, and for answering all of those questions. We really thank you for that. And while we're going to move on to our next presenters, and while Susan and Amy are pulling up their PowerPoints, Allison is putting up another poll.
So the poll says, in your experience, what is the biggest barrier Guard and Reserve members face when seeking support? Lack of resources, eligibility, benefit confusion, geographic distance from services, stigma around seeking help, or other? Type in chat. So it looks like the lack of awareness of resources won the biggest barrier choice on our poll. So, and I had noticed on the first poll that 70% said that all National Guards were veterans, and only and 33% said no. And I think the answer is both.
It depends.
Depends.
It depends. So yes, and so I just put that response in the chat that if for us National Guardsmen, if we do not deploy federally, essentially we go to war. We're not activated on title. So the great thing about the California National Guardsmen being activated in LA by the president, all of those 4,000 members that were activated, they are now veterans. And even if they were never afforded the opportunity to deploy before that, they are all now veterans and they have VA benefits and entitlements. It's 4,000 California National Guardsmen that I don't need to worry about and advocate for as much anymore. But if they didn't, so they say that they're in a position where they just don't deploy. They don't go overseas, or they're not tasked to do anything, but they respond to every state crisis for 20 years of service. And they have 20 years of responding to floods, earthquakes, fires, but they never deploy under Title 10 or Title 32. Once they retire from 20 years of service, then they are considered veterans. But before that, they are not.
Well, good morning, good afternoon. And my name is Susan Robinson. I am a program analyst for the very lengthy title of the Reserve Component Transition Assistance Advisor Program. But a lot of the times we just shorten it to RCTA because it kind of rolls a lot better than having to say that big long title every time. I've been with the program for nearly 4 years, been working in the military space since 2007, so got a wealth of knowledge. And my co-presenter here today is Amy Hale. She is also an RCTA in the great state of Wisconsin. She also has retired from the Wisconsin Army National Guard. She is a veteran, and she also is a military spouse of a Wisconsin Army National Guard veteran. So we are going to let you go, and Amy's going to talk a little bit more about kind of some Guard insights and piggybacking off of what Josh just presented.
Yeah, and Susan, if you could advance the entire slide, then I won't have to say next and all that great stuff. But I'm going to keep my camera off because it's a little bit spotty here for some reason with my internet connection. So Josh did a great job with breaking down the AGR versus the ADOS versus the MDay. The AGR, those are the ones that go into the armories on base daily to provide that daily support. The ADOS, that active duty for operational support, is also Title 32 orders, and the MDays, those are also in that Title 32 status. And just because you're in any of those status does not necessarily mean that you're automatically eligible for those VA benefits. So Title 10 is that kicker there for you as well, but there's some nuances with that, which I can get into in a little bit. But those technicians as well, those Title 32 technicians is that dual status where they wear their uniform every day, but they're not working technically for the Army, they're working as a federal technician. They have that dual status, and then on the weekends, they're wearing their uniforms again, going in and doing their military job. Their technician job doesn't necessarily always align with their military job. So there's another twist and turn as it relates to another duty status for the National Guard. And then again, what if I serve that 20 plus years and never become federalized? Josh did a great job with that. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're considered a veteran status. I will say after a certain period of time, especially for the National Guard, once you hit that 6 years of service, that's when some of those other VA benefits open up for you, like that VA home loan. Or if you do get that Title 10 underneath your belt, the VA home loan opens up for you once again. If you hit your ETS and never deploy, the veteran status is difficult to get if you don't get that Title 10 under your belt, or those Title 32 federal orders that are paid by under those presidential call-ups. If you get hurt while you're on orders under a contract, for instance, that's where that LOD comes into play, that line of duty. If you get injured and you're able to get that line of duty, get that documented, because those line of duties, while you don't necessarily need a line of duty to file for VA benefits, it absolutely is beneficial as supporting document and really adds a lot more context to your disability payments or your disability packets. And then if you get hurt on state active duty, Josh did a great job. It's absolutely workers' compensation. You don't get that that VA status, that federal status, that if you get injured on state active duty, whether or not it's for those floods or whether or not it's for civil disturbances, if you get injured in that status, it's workers' comp, and you follow the state employee guidelines for that. And Susan has it on the slide. Guard members and their families do wear many hats. The Guard member, it's especially important, as well as the family supporting them, that if you've got a Guard member leaving and deploying, that's 50% of your team is out the door. And so imagine if you are in a military unit and you lose 50% of your squad, you're absolutely a little less mission capable. And so when you've got that family, they're losing 50% of their team to getting deployed. That's where all of these resources that Susan and I come into play and get those, assist you with getting those.
And Amy, talk a little bit about, I mean, you have that firsthand knowledge of, when there are times that you've been on deployment, your husband's been on deployment, what happens? Like what resources, because you're not in that military community. You're back at your right. Normal residence.
Yep. We don't have those base resources. So my husband and I, both being dual military, well, now I'm retired. He's still AGR. And we were deployed a couple times at the same time period, same locations, whether it was Iraq, Kosovo, elsewhere. It just happened that we deployed at the same time. So those family care plans definitely come into play. You have to have that huge family support system and those resources for childcare, who's going to take care of the children, who's going to take care of the house. Those types of resources are out there and available to service members. So I'm glad that you did bring that up. It is a challenging time for any military service member, not just dual military families, but any service member, because families serve too. They feel the pains of and the hecticness of being in the military and serving. Both, not only do guardsmen have to manage their civilian side of the house, but then on the weekends and I guarantee throughout the week, depending on your status, you're doing NCOERs or evaluations, or you're logging into your computer to do some military work before you get ready for drill. So it's definitely a little bit more hectic. They've got different schedules being dual-hatted as a civilian and a military member.
I have a story of a spouse telling me of their kid's school was doing a military support. It was with the Iowa National Guard, and there was a wear purple for that day if you were a military connected family. And one boy, his father's getting ready to deploy. He's in kindergarten. He's very proud of his dad. And there was another kid that gave him a hard time and says, well, your dad's not in. And a kid that was another family member, they were all in the same unit. He piped up and said, yes, he is. He's just the same service member as anybody else. And so that's the other issue of not having being surrounded by a military community, is that you may or may not know of those unless you happen to see your neighbor or somebody in your community wearing their ACUs, their when they're on ready to go to a drill weekend or something like that, because they do blend into the community so well. But what we do is we are we are a federal contractor that works for service members, veterans, and their dependents. So what we essentially are is a resource referral agent. We are the ones putting those connections together when somebody in the Guard or Reserve have an issue with trying to figure out their benefits, what eligibility that they have, things like of that nature. We started in 2005 just by a simple memorandum of agreement with the National Guard Bureau and the Department of Veteran Affairs. And if you think back, 2005, now, we are fighting two different fronts. The National Guard is getting called up pretty regularly, and that's even before the surge in 2007. So, NGB, which is an abbreviation for the National Guard Bureau, thought, hey, we've got all of the service members coming back home and trying to reintegrate. How can we get them better equipped and better aligned before and after the mission to serve our country? So we are codified into the National Defense Authorization Act of 2013, basically to say that we serve as points for eligible reserve component service members through order or laws by the Department of Defense and by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Now, when we say eligible, we do have an eligibility requirement of at least 180 days of Title X service. However, that is for us to be able to count and document those numbers. But if you've got that E4 that, says first service contract, never deployed, has questions, send them to us. We'll still be able to do those warm handoffs. Or if we don't know the answer and be able to answer something real quick, being able to get them in the right hands. So when you do have that, homeless or somebody with housing insecurity, being able to make sure that they're going to have that roof over their head. So our mission, we are in. There is a presence from an RCTA in every state and territory. We've got, we were talking earlier before the room opened up, of the time fun of meeting with our teammate who is in Guam versus those that are in Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, or even, East Coast to Guam. But there's someone that covers that area to be able to assist to make sure that they know what they are entitled to. And a lot of the times, I come from a military family. When you come from a military family and you also want to serve, but you have a medical condition that prevents you from doing that, and you have a brother-in-law that is a drill sergeant who has made it his life mission to make sure that you do not wear a uniform, you find other ways of being able to serve. So we draw from our own experiences to make sure to educate, advocate, and really empower those service members in the Guard and Reserve through their benefits. So we have 10 areas where we function and serve in. We get confused a lot of the time for the TAP, the Transition Assistance Program. Which TAP is for if you're on the active duty side. That's when you're getting out, you're retiring, you're leaving, and you're going through, okay, how do I transition from here and there? When I brief, I tell people, think about what the word transition actually means. It just means change. So any type of change that you're going through, if you've served in the Guard or the Reserve, we're going to be able to kind of help assist and provide some direction with that. State benefits, it's all different in each state and territory. It's both a hindrance and a blessing. I'm in Illinois. We have a couple great benefits, one of which is our legislature had basically duplicated USERRA to where we have a law in the books called ISERRA. So when you do go on state active orders, you have the same benefits as USERRA. So what I encourage people is to be able to check things out. Wisconsin, they've got the fabulous, which sometimes also becomes confusing, the Wisconsin GI Bill, which Amy, if you want to talk about that one.
Absolutely. So every member of the Wisconsin Army and Air National Guard are eligible to utilize the Wisconsin GI Bill. And that provides for up to 128 credit hours at any University of Wisconsin school or Wisconsin Technical College. But also, if you are service connected at 30% or more with the VA, that benefit opens up to each of your dependents in their own right. Unlike the post 9/11 where you have to transfer, up to 36 months of that benefit and transfer it and divvy it up between your dependents, the Wisconsin GI Bill, each dependent gets that benefit of 128 credit hours at any University of Wisconsin school or Wisconsin Technical College. So it's a phenomenal Wisconsin state benefit for the service member and for the dependents of those service members that are service connected at that 30% or more. The caveat to all of that for both the veteran and the dependent is that, or I should say service member and dependent, is that you need to be a Wisconsin service member of at least 5 years to be eligible for that.
So, I highly encourage you all to, reach out. Each state and territory does have a separate state department of veteran affairs. If you've not looked into some of the nuances, looking past being able to get a license plate, being able to get that designation on your driver's license, many states provide the ability to show if you're a disabled veteran a discount or complete waiver of your property taxes. Dig into that to be able to find those benefits. Physical and mental health well-being, we'll lump that in with the VA at large. The VA, we all know, it's complex. And people will go through and be like, I have no idea where to start. For those who have gone on orders, there is written into law up to 10 years of free healthcare through the VA, depending upon where that deployment area is. You know, it's not insurance, it's not, but it's able to help with being able to track any changes that may occur with you. That also helps with those disabled benefits claims. And Amy is an absolute expert when it comes to filing those claims. So I'm going to let her pick that up.
Well, I'm going to actually caveat too on the VA healthcare because at one point it was for those transitioning service members for the OEF and OIF rotations. But now, since the expansion of the VA, the PACT Act back in March of 2024, Susan, right? Now it's for those cohorts of all of those PACT Act areas. And that's the largest expansion for that VA healthcare. So if you were in Djibouti, if you were in Qatar, any places like that fall under that PACT Act, you're automatically eligible for that VA healthcare. You just have to apply for it. As far as the disabled veterans benefits, that disability compensation claim, Susan said it best once, that if Uncle Sam broke you and he can't fix you, that's where that VA disability compensation claim comes into play. And there's a couple different ways you can file for those disability compensation claims. And I always strongly encourage don't file alone, file with a VSO, a Veteran Service Organization, County Veterans Service Office, because it can be complicated, but your RCTAA in your state can get you started, walk you through that claims process, the different types of disability compensation claims. Even as a guardsman or a technician, not AGR, you can file for that disability compensation claim even while still being a drilling service member and receive that monthly disability compensation pay from the VA and still serve. During periods of active duty or during periods of IDT, the following year that will come out of your VA check for any days that you were paid active duty and receiving it at the same time. So essentially, you're just paying 4 days back a month for the IDT and then 15 days of your annual training time. But the rest of the time, you're getting that VA disability compensation that's state tax-free and federal tax-free. So I strongly encourage reaching out to your TAA in your state. Susan, I don't know if you're able to drop in the maze of where all of the TAAs are located in the chat. Or at the end,
we'll keep it to the next slide. The other thing, we were talking about employment assistance. There is a fantastic program called NGEN. It's an acronym because, it's military, but it's the National Guard Employment Network. Guess who that's geared toward? The National Guard. So if you served in the National Guard, you as a serving member of the Guard, your spouse, or any dependents, they're eligible for a lot of the same services. So that whole question of veteran, non-veteran, they're just looking that if you served, NGEN is able to assist with resume building. They have a database. They're through another program, Vet Jobs. They're mirror of one another, but they're a great resource. Education and training. That is another one where so people, there is sometimes a misconception that, hey, I'm going on the deployment, I'm going to get all of my post 9/11 GI Bill. Unfortunately for the Guard, you have to have 36 months of Title 10 time to be able to get that full 100%. So if you get sent to, we'll say Djibouti again. So if you get sent to Djibouti for a year, you'll actually only get 60% of your post 9/11. Can you accumulate more? Absolutely. But it's not an instant thing. And then to be able to transfer it to your dependents, say, you joined the National Guard because you want to be able to give education benefits to your kids. There is a process where you have to have a minimum of 10 years of reserve service or 10 years of service, having 4 years of transferability, so 4 years remaining on a contract, and you have to have that individual in DEERS. So I get a question of, well, I don't have kids yet. Well, I can't make a hypothetical situation prove positive by not being an actual person yet. So there's nobody to transfer it to. Health and life insurance. We work pretty closely with our TRICARE representatives to be able to make sure that as people come on and off orders or things change, that we put them with the right person to be able to make sure that their orders are set. That is a big portion, and Josh hit on it as well. Somebody knows that they're about to be put on orders, and they're waiting for for TRICARE is being able to see those orders and DEERs to be able to say, oh, yep, you're covered under insurance. And so it's a lot of the times, again, the family members are the ones in the middle who may or may not be able to do much about it. Financial assistance, we're able to link with various resources. Again, checking in your local community. We also have those benevolent funds that we're able to assist with. Legal assistance, being able to help put with contacts through veterans courts if those are needed, through JAGs, and then any additional state resources that we have. Career change, being able to talk through. In Illinois, we actually have a whole presentation on talking about, okay, if your military service ended tomorrow, because clearly you're still in service today, what does that look like? What benefits are you entitled to? What benefits are you not entitled to? What things start and stop because your status changes? So talk about that. And then relocation assistance, that's one I'm not going to be ones, and none of my teammates in the RCTA program are going to be ones packing boxes or booking moving trucks. That is if you do have somebody that's going from one state or another, or locating from one end of the state to the other end of the state, being able to assist them, or those that are dealing with housing insecurity issues, we have contacts and resources to be able to assist. So Amy had said something about being able to contact. This is probably our easiest way. This is a QR code to our digital intake sheet. What it is we go through and it will send an email based on your response. So if you're in Texas, it will send an email to Team Texas saying, you're inquiring about services or wanting to be able to connect with them. We do ask, if you're watching from here, if you would mark that we have an option of how'd you hear about us, that it does have AWP on there. So we would appreciate you doing that. That way we know that you do know a little bit about us, but learning more and getting that direct connection to our TAAs that are in the field all across the nation. And with that, we'll open it up to comments, questions, concerns, and we'll hand it back over to Jeanette.
All right, let's see if we've got some questions. I think we do. So is RCTAA a federal program, or is it a Wisconsin state program?
We are federal contractors, so it is a federal program.
Let's see. Oh, Allison had an interesting comment. She said, just a note, one of America's Warrior Partnerships presenters at our symposium said that her second deployment transition from reserve component back to civilian was the hardest for her mentally, and she felt she had less support.
It's a commonality. We've been around 20 years, and similar to Angus, that there are people who have served less than 20 years who still aren't aware of the programs that we provide. So using the help and the tools that we have as one community serving all military members, hopefully we'll be able to get the word out a little bit better.
Yeah, and that's why we're glad that we had that this opportunity today for the three of you to come and share this information. I know that we here in the network get a lot of referrals for National Guard folks, and so it's great to talk to you, learn about some new resources, and so that we have somebody we can reach out to if we have questions. So we thank you for that. As we're wrapping up, if anybody has another question, please pop that in the chat for us and take a look at the middle of your screen and take the closing poll, if you will, please. All right, we would like to thank Amy, Josh, and Susan for their informative presentations. Our next battle rhythm is going to take place on November 3rd. We will be focusing on supporting military families, and we hope all of you will be able to attend. Looks like our closing poll shows that after today's session, 38% of you are very confident in your ability to support Guard and Reserve members. 5% are somewhat confident, 52% are more confident than they were an hour ago, and 5% are still a little unsure. And for those of you who are somewhat confident and still a little unsure, we hope that having Susan, Josh, and Amy's information will give you a place that you can go if you have questions, and they can help guide you. So hopefully that will be helpful. We're going to wrap up today. I thank you all for collaborating and sharing. America's Warrior Partnership's ultimate goal is to improve the quality of life of all veterans and end suicide by empowering local communities to know all of their veterans and serve them holistically before a crisis occurs. America's Warrior Partnership's model, community integration, amplifies local efforts by bringing communities, veteran-serving organizations together to bridge gaps in available services and by connecting local groups to national resources. We believe communities are the best equipped to improve the life of veterans. We hope that today's battle rhythm provided you with powerful insights, best practices, new partners, and tools to do just that.